Well, I think we should just start with what the guys are about. How did the guys who do difficult fall into place? Where did that come from, do you think?
It's really interesting. I kind of can tell you a little bit of my story with it, and
Just do.
Just see where we go. So, I think, to be honest with you, guys that do difficult, I think I was my whole sort of professional career was in that too difficult to do slot. I grew up in the construction industry, right?
Right. Yeah.
And the construction industry for me was always, how on earth are we going to build this thing? We haven't built one of these before, you know.
Yeah.
How are we going to source all the materials, the labour, the specialist subcontractors, especially if it was in far-flung places that are away from home base. And I think the construction industry taught me a lot about overcoming challenges. And actually, the whole thing about getting the right people together, people you could trust, people that you might have worked with before, to make things happen. And there was that combination of the challenge and making things happen, I think was a real kind of, it started to create my DNA, you know, and so moving into sort of real estate and local government, that DNA didn't leave me. It was always about how are we going to solve this problem.
But also in that world of the trades, it was, you had to have a strategic mind to look ahead and understand what's coming at you, because you had to be ready on the day.
Yeah.
Which means that the forward planning and the forward vision was necessary. And then that forward vision became strategic, and it allowed you to do things differently and more unique in terms of delivery or design or in terms of human. That's an important talent, really.
Yeah.
You know, it's a good skill set.
And I think that's what we bring to the party.
That's what we do. We absolutely do.
And I think, you know, it's not about project management. It's not about delivery. There's lots of people that can do that out there.
Yeah.
But sometimes I think these issues get sold short on the basis that some people think, oh, it's all about project management.
Yeah.
And it's not. A lot of project management these days is about process.
Mechanic.
Yeah, it's mechanic. It's a step by step. Now, there's a place for that, absolutely. You know.
Yeah.
But also that being able to take that wider strategic role, being able to understand when the project or what you're doing actually needs to tack from point to point.
It's value. It's understanding value and delivering value.
And sometimes that drives the project management people mad.
It drives them totally mad. I mean, a little bit on my side, in hindsight, where I found I actually started turning a corner was when I was doing my master's degree, my master's in architecture. Because I did a fine art degree first, my second degree was a 3-year degree. So I did 1 year in the studios, what I call gravity and rainwater, the engineering and the structures and designing a building, and I thought, I don't like this. So I went to the School of Anthropology and studied people and the way people live and what they do and how people inform the built environment, inform experience and inform the intangible. And that's just always been at the heart of kind of where I've been. And that's really important, really good attributes. And in that light of those legacy experiences, which are formative to each of us and important to each of us, we then in later life, and I won't say how much later, but quite a bit later, we both, not simultaneously, but within a similar time frame, went through a professional life's transition. And it's one of those transitions where you ask questions of yourself because you've been doing something. You've been, Sheffield for years and years, and myself years and years. And we learned that both of us had been through this. We've been business colleagues, business friends for many, many years. And so when I learned that was the case, we decided that, as strategists do, that we needed to have lunch. And so I taught her on the train and came up and we sat together for hours. And it was really, really great fun because it was a bit of reminiscent and learning about each other and what we'd done and how both there were very similar things, but also very different, but yet collaborative things, and how we were both setting off on our own courses to be selectively and casually engaged professionally, but not wanting to take on the full burden. And we don't want to be consultants, and we don't want to be, we want to be innovators and ideas leaders and that kind of stuff.
Yeah, and I think it's that realization of both of our experiences from kind of even different sides of the coin almost, then it was complementary, and is something that can add. Yeah, I know it sounds a bit of a cliche, but adding value, but we truly can add value to some of the serious challenges that are being faced out there from a sort of urban, whether it's urban regeneration in its widest sense, whether it's particular development projects, you know, the complications and the issues. The old sort of rule book's gone out the window now. And I think with the experience that we have, the broader sense of, in a strategic sense of things, we can actually help people to find the solutions to their challenges in a way that is actually long-lasting and creates a legacy for them.
And what's really kind of fun is that, and again, as we talked that day, it became quite evident, is that it's substantive government, local authority work, the substantive commercial work, but what we've both done is built notable organizations. So our ability to understand corporate culture, business culture, design culture, creative culture is almost as important or more important than anything else. Because it's so often today that point of departure, and what's the mindset, and what words are used, and how you find yourself in it, and how you find discovery. And for me, it's always about narrative. And so they've got to be able to express and write and feel and believe. And so culture is a huge part of this, I think. And I think we'd be really good at helping to establish that.
Very much.
It's really quite exciting. So we decided that I mean, we're not creating a company, we're just creating cool stuff to do. Which excited us both, because it takes away all that. We've done businesses, we've done employees, we've done PAYE, we've done all that stuff.
We've got our own things anyway.
We've got our own things anyway. So we're coming together to just do some things that are cool. And we don't know what there are, but they'll fall on us in the due course of time. And so then what happened was we went to this little event in Leicester. It was in Leicester. In Leicester. And you were talking to one of your local authority colleagues and sort of trying to describe and articulate what it was we were doing. And that individual said to you, you're the guys that do difficult.
That's right. Exactly that. And I hadn't thought about it before in that sense, but the fact that, that's how I was described, that's hit the nail on the head.
It hit the nail on the head. That's exactly what we wanted to do. I love it. That's cool.
So, Paul, it's really interesting, the amount of, I'm going to say noise, the amount of noise that's out there around development, regeneration, urban issues, and so on and so forth. And it seems like the whole world is scrabbling around trying to find a solution to the changes that are happening right now. And, whether it's retail change or now workplace change and so on and so forth. And the volume is different in different places. So again, maybe culturally, because say in the UK, we've kind of propensities, or shopping on the internet now, in general terms, whereas maybe in the continent, they're still going to local markets and enjoying that. And so the issues are different, the volume's different. But it's all this big noise about creating places and placemaking and urban regeneration and activation and so on. But that's a real issue, and it's like the future of our cities, and there's so much noise and discussion and debate about the future of cities, future of places. But reading a lot of what's being written, I keep buy the next book, or what are they saying? And then I get bored halfway through because I'm thinking, hang on a minute, you're not telling me anything new. You're not telling me anything that I didn't already know, and it's kind of a respin of existing stuff. And that draws me back to my own experience and what I was doing, and the real challenges. The real practical challenge is trying to make things happen in a fast-changing and difficult environment. So take half the city, Sheffield, for example, where there was a developer in tow to deliver a retail scheme. They couldn't make it work. Cutting a long story short, I got involved as a city council, decided the only way forward was to go alone and deliver it. Maybe very extreme in some circumstances to do that. But out of necessity, that's what was required. But as well as ultimately coming up with the physical model of what needed to be delivered, moving away from the traditional retail anchor and a retail-led regeneration scheme. It became very much mixed use. The anchor ended up being HSBC for a new office development. I'll never forget doing the deal with those guys down in Canary Wharf. But that created the momentum. That was the catalyst. And from that, there was this. The other issue was, how on earth do you finance this? How do you pull this together, given local government finances? And so coming up, as well as designing the master plan, what was key was designing the finances in tandem, which kept the, usually very risk-averse finance people happy. And, that combining that, working with people in the team, getting the governance right was really a really important step. But I think, coming back to the noise and those issues of today, I think what's called for now is new partnerships, new ways of the public sector and the private sector working together. Public sector taking a long-term view, doing the heavy lifting. There's no way on earth that a private sector development appraisal is going to be delivered if it's underwater. It's not going to happen. But this is where government, central government, local government need to find new innovative ways of working in partnership with the private sector. Heart of the City might have been an extreme model. It was more public sector than private sector. But needs were as they were, and it's become a success and a real model for how to do things through the public sector without actually putting your local council at risk. How lots of councils are actually finding it difficult these days. So those new ways of working and coming together, I think, is crucial. And I think again, our experiences, we've lived and breathe this stuff.
Yeah, exactly. It's not a surprise.
And you could probably write our own book and actually probably be a bestseller.
We should do that.
And maybe we should do that. because all I'm reading at the moment is kind of, I'm thinking, well, hang on a minute, I could have written this and actually done a lot better at it. So,
well, and also the thing I love about where we are now, and it's certainly what you've done here, and the space in which we sit here in Sheffield today is a great exemplar of the need for bravery and innovation and forward thinking. So many of the models that we've historically delivered, be it a retail model, be it a shopping center model, be it an office model, in today's world it's stressed, it's strained. Yeah, the big guys will hold, but there's such a transition towards new products, new models, new occupiers, that it has to transform. And as we were saying earlier, is that the old pattern form doesn't fit, and we can't say today, you and I would never say today, do it this way. But we do feel by the legacy and history of what we own that we can ask a whole lot of better questions. And by doing that and participating in that, we can deliver something that's really innovative. And again, I think that process is what you had done here in Sheffield over the years.
And thinking about current central government narratives around levelling up and the like, well, it's really interesting how levelling up has been about capital expenditure on certain projects around the country. But for me, it's really, if we're going to really level up or deal with the inequalities in this country and deal with the social value aspects a lot of the private sector friends of ours are trying to grapple with, how do we build in the social value into our schemes? For me, it's actually around trying to deliver schemes that will actually make a difference to local people.
Yeah.
You can call it the foundational economy or foundational living, but how does your development, how does that regeneration scheme improve the lives of local people? If we take where we're sat today, what we did through the council was, for certain buildings, insist on leases that had real living wage clauses built in. So it was about, you can lease this building, but you have to pay your people a proper wage. So that helps local people, helps that foundational economy grow. It lifts people out of stress in their financial situation. From a well-being position, we were going to build multi-storey car parks. We said, forget all of that, let's build a park. And here today is a lovely day today, and you've seen it. People are out there enjoying the space. Children are playing. There's water play. There's soft play. It's good for people's well-being, and that's a new park on prime real estate in the city centre. Yeah. But it's creating a space for all. It's not perfect, but it's gone a long way to deliver that purposeful regeneration.
I was going to go there because you've coined that phrase and used that phrase a lot, the purposeful regeneration. And my read of that is that for it to be purposeful, for it to have a root cause or a because in my lexicon, you have to own it. You have to own the heart and soul of it. And that park is a lovely exemplar of it because it's the council's park. They owned it. They didn't say, developer, here's a section 106 and you got to throw some capital at it and get some knuckleheaded builder to come do something cheap. You owned it. You understood what they wanted. You've got things that you delivered there physically in park design that other people wouldn't be brave enough to do. But it now thrives as a place within the heart of your heart of the city.
Yeah.
That's a real exemplar.
Yeah.
That's purposeful
It
regeneration.
really is. And also, it's not forgetting the commercial aspects of this. We've got some key commercial tenants, big international PLCs and local PLCs that are taking office space here, along with providing space for the independent, small business, artisans, startups. The building we're in now is you can come and rent a desk. So there's everything from the small individual entrepreneur that's coming to rent a desk to your big international corporates within the space. But other things that we did here was sort of stopping investors buying the residential elements, so that you had owner-occupiers creating a new sense of community, actually getting all the tenants, whether it's residential and commercial tenants, creating a new sort of forum where we could meet each other and create that new community. Those are the things that have sort of really lift this up from just, any kind of normal development. And I think in part this was because the main developer as the local authority was able to take that long-term view. And I think that long-term view is really important going forwards. And given the stresses and strains on the economy generally and on local government finances, finding that balance between the private sector and the public sector is what it will be the key to unlock things in different places to different levels of intervention.
And in the context of capital markets and finance, what has maybe dissipated a bit is trust. Are you able to deliver? Is it real? Is it commercial? And when you have that relationship between the local authority, which has a long-term covenant in its own right, and a private developer working together, the capital can trust that. They can find a balance of trust in that. And I think that just facilitates then the delivery of all those very cool things.
I think you talked earlier about people don't need to be brave around certain things. And I think if you look at the context in today's world with local authorities actually getting a little bit nervous about where and how they might invest. Certain councils have got it wrong, and spectacular headlines around the issues that those councils are facing. But councils always throughout history, if you look back to the early part of the 20th century, councils were innovative. They actually operated different trading companies, whether it was the gasworks or the waterworks or the tram company or the bus company or whatever. They did all of that. We seem to have lost something over the intervening years, whereas especially a lot of those services were put out to market forces to deliver. So there is a sort of capability issue in local government, something that's missing. But the role to help places regenerate, revitalise, repurpose is very much still part of what local government should be doing. But there has to be that partnership with the private sector.
You referred to noise earlier, and I think that's a lovely word in the context of where we are today, because it's again, it goes back to having not assuming you've got the answer, but being be inquisitive enough and innovative enough to change. So I'm going to take on a challenging one. It's a bit of a pet peeve myself, so this may be cut from all of this. Placemaking. There's a big marketplace noise, let's say, about placemaking. And by so many people and so many in different industries, whether it's the planning consultants or whether it's the designers and the architects, in their view, it's a physical thing. We're going to make 4 sides in this list to be the thing in between, and we're going to call that place. And that's not it. That's not it. It's about the human being, how they live, how they use it, how they color it in their own views, what lens they see it through, that happens to make it evocative and provocative and engaging and interesting. And again, if we use your work here in Sheffield as an example, the way in which you're able to take the legacy of making in Sheffield, good bless. I mean, you know, the years and years, everything from the metals and the silver and the steel and the iron and on into many, many other things, and integrate that making culture in with a current commercial context and a current business context in one is really special. That's place.
That's place. And, you know, picking up a point you mentioned earlier about sort of anthropology and so on, well, you know, I actually completely separate to you, and you were on your path and I was on my path, but I also came across the world of anthropology, and I did some study, short study, but study nonetheless through University of Oxford in looking at social anthropology. And actually, again, from this guy that started in the construction industry, and it was, you know, it was about the buildings and the challenges and so on. But ultimately, that change in career, that working in local government property, and then real estate and regeneration, I actually got fed up with all the kind of standard models with that. And I thought, no, this is about people. And it's about, coming back to placemaking, it's about that space that becomes place when people want to be there.
Right, just it. That's the answer. That's the answer.
If nobody wants to be there, it's not placemaking. It's
not placemaking, exactly.
And so it's got to be about creating the right conditions, or the natural conditions that people will gravitate to. And you're right, you know, talking about the Sheffield DNA, those the metal trades, the independent trades that come together. Again, we've woven that into the Heart of the City scheme alongside the big corporates.
Yeah.
So Lear's Yard oversubscribed with people wanting to take space in there. The building we're in now, the Cubo workspace, again, full, you know, of small entrepreneurs, but also other medium-sized businesses that have taken space here. So it's created that sort of almost honeypot effect that people want to be here.
But it's a weave, isn't it?
They want to interact.
It's a weave. To steal from the fashion world, or the making world, even, it's a weave. Each strand has its own integral personality and character. In fabric, it's color, tone, strength. In the world of placemaking, it's sociological, physiological, physical, and behavioral, right? It's all these, and that weave has to come together, and then all of a sudden the fabric of your place is really very, very rich. And you can't define that. It's the flow of water. It is the flow of water.
It is the flow of water. And when back in 2017, when I stood in the middle of this site and was trying to work out how on earth are we going to do this? How are we going to deliver this? And when my very, very scratchy sketch, I'm no artist, absolutely. I should have come to you in the first place to draw it up, but my very scratchy sketch, I didn't take it to anyone in the real estate world. I took it to people in the museums industry. I took it to people within the cultural engagement teams within the University of Sheffield, and I said, "What do you think of this?" And I had the picture. It was very scratchy, so I had to have a narrative and a bit of a key, and I kind of did it in my own sort of clumsy way, but I said, this is the vision for this place. What do you think? Or this space even at that point in time. What do you think of this? And they loved it. They could see that the retention of some of the heritage buildings, the sort of uses that I was talking about, meant that people would gravitate to that space to make it a place. When I shared that initial information with the real estate guys, they all hated it because this was breaking the mold. They didn't know, they hadn't seen that mold before, you know, the new mold. They hadn't seen that before, so they didn't like it. It was, this is never going to work, you know, the development place is now going to work. But now it's everybody's idea, which is great. I'll take that.
Yeah, sure,
you know? And so, and everyone, to be fair, everyone played their part. The refinement of that very scratchy plan was done by others. You know, looking at the occupier sort of strategy, you know, was all helped by others and everyone else on the team. So everyone's played their part in it. So let everyone take that success from that. But it was really about doing something different, and it was really interesting how the initial reaction from, you know, our traditional sort of real estate guys was, no, it's never going to work. And now everyone loves it. You know, and I think that coming back to that focus on people, thinking about that anthropology side, thinking about how we operate, what makes us as people tick, was actually the key to success with this particular scheme.
I'll move this on to another thing we talked about as we were walking up here, and it's something that I found, I guess partly because of personal interest, is how much in today's world, today's economy, things like the arts, education, be it fine art, be it performance art, be it theater art, academically or otherwise, through CICs, not-for-profits, charitable organizations, is emerging as more important. It's emerging in signature. It's emerging in engagement. And whereas it used to be historically a Section 106 or a FOB or a gifted, it is now becoming more and more, I think, a critical signature entity in development. And one of the examples I would always hold out is if you look at how Hauser and Wirth have gone from a pair with Sotheby's or Christie's in the art world, and they're migrating way over into the entertainment world. So they're immersive learning, they're immersive training. Yes, there's all those galleries with fine art and fine product, and they're selling as much as they can because they're a commercial entity. But their kids programs and their design programs, and how they're actually defining their new destinations by experience. Pace galleries, the White Cube galleries in London, and then your site gallery here.
Yeah.
You know, the arts engagement, immersive, cross generations.
Yeah.
Again, it's anthropology, it's human, and it's becoming a more important component, which I think is, if not exemplar in terms of what new development should consider as engagement, but is certainly at the cutting edge of what possibly could be a new move.
And again, and I think that's a really key point, and it comes back to my thoughts on that public-private partnership, because you know, whether it's a museum, a gallery, exhibition space, whatever, it usually has a negative sort of revenue implication to it. So where's the subsidy, where's the cross-subsidy, where's the public funding or whatever? Not in all cases, but generally so. However, and I think that's what sort of tends to gets pushed to the side all the time. Oh, we can't afford to do that, we can't do this, we can't do that. But you're absolutely spot on in terms of that whole cultural scene being what we come together for in the urban context. It's not necessarily about retail anymore.
No.
It could well be about food, but the food also is part of our culture, part of our combined cultures from across the planet. How we all come together in the UK and we experience different foods and we all enjoy that. And that's our coming together and we're meeting. And I think culture, sometimes I sort of see culture and heritage split. I actually see it all as culture. Culture is, you know, who we are, what we do, and how we celebrate
and
that.
how you express it.
Exactly.
You know, how you find yourself in it, and then proud of it.
Yeah.
Own it. I mean, it comes back to owning it. Own the culture. Believe in it.
We were talking about sort of, you know, the inequalities or social development and so on, and I think it can play a massive role in helping people find confidence, finding how they network with people, their own identity, how they express themselves, and I think, you know, that's got to be a big part of the mix going forward for what we do in our urban centres in terms of bringing the culture. And I use that word broadly. It's the heritage, it's the arts, it's you know, it's the visual arts.
It's real broad.
It's the audible arts. It's all of that.
But it's accessible, which is really important.
Yeah.
Innovation tends to chase and sometimes and very often overtake, I'll call tradition or pattern. The variable today that is, I think, probably one of the most transformative is time. The time it takes for things to change these days is getting shorter and shorter and shorter because it can. And it's the introduction of all the technology. It's the absolute capacity for that to roll and roll and roll and roll. You know, it's in the portfolio career versus the lifetime career, right?
Yeah.
You know, our kids are going to have 10 jobs in the years we had one. What I'm finding is that it's challenging the commercial real estate world significantly, because what I'll call the gravity and rainwater business is a 10-year project. And in those 10 years, all these little businesses, these growing businesses, independent businesses, and new ideas and new innovations, and whether it's new ways of banking, whether it's new ways of cooking food, whether it's new ways of cutting fabric, it happens faster and faster and faster. And so how does the real estate world respond? How does it relate to something in its core client base, occupation, that's moving at a pace of 10x.
Yeah.
What happens then?
Yeah, and I think this is where globally the dial needs resetting. The economic expectations of real estate need a reset because it constantly changes. You just articulated there the changes, immense the changes at pace, and we can't keep up with it. And bricks and mortar definitely can't keep up with that. The digital world is so fast that we can't keep up with that. So adaptive, and then can't remember which architect probably coined the phrase, but that adaptive reuse aspect, I think, is something that we are going to have to get used to. Designing things that have got flexibility built in. This scheme itself was very much part of that, in that it was a block by block, building by building, as opposed to some super mal or whatever that was created that once it's built, it's built. If it starts to fail, the whole thing needs to come down or be changed. So flexibility built in. But also things like how we value these things going forward is absolutely
that's
critical.
a big issue.
It's a big issue.
It's a big issue because
at the moment the model is still linked to how that real estate portfolio works with regards to our pension schemes and so on and so forth. And I think there's going to be something around looking at things almost from a sort of hedonistic valuation perspective, where we're actually looking at the utilisation of the assets. And coming back to that placemaking,
that's very important.
Places being utilised, and that being a key factor within the valuation process, so that it's not just about there's the rentals flow and what's the covenant strength of the occupier, right? We can capitalise it at this yield and everyone's happy. No. Lots of other factors can have to be taken into account. And even if you think about the environmental social governance agenda, really, what's that about? That's all about risk management. Climate change. Oh my goodness me! My brother-in-law down in Cornwall is now growing bananas. I think Cornwall's got one of either England's or Europe's largest tea estate. Now, hang on a minute. As somebody that's got a Sri Lankan heritage, it's kind of Sri Lanka's now developing in Cornwall, for goodness' sake, in terms of what you can grow there. So these changes are real.
It's very real.
These changes are very real, and therefore we're going to have to look at a value system that is dealing with those changes, those environmental changes, the social changes, how we need to govern things, what's the participation of employees or citizens, and so on and so forth. And that, I think, as we move forward, I think that's going to have to become part of the valuation process.
And what I would love to see, if I can project, is that when we're not saying replace the methodology of valuation and investment in and capitalization of fixed real estate. What I'm saying is that there's a whole other world emerging, which is a bit more agile, a bit more flexible, less long-term, more short-term, but to find a way to value that with a new metric that parallels, maybe allows the two to thrive together, but it recognizes that there is a whole new industry, shall we say, that's emerging and growing that has really great value. It's just shorter-lived. And also what's really kind of cool in that new model is that learning becomes a real integral part to it. So as we were saying before about the arts and all forms of arts being important, in that world, education and learning, and it goes into universities and above all level of learning, but certainly you can start to bring in the innovation of the universities into the growth in that industry, and that is hugely impressive.
And something else that I've talked about in the past is place as a service. And I think this is a really cool. It's a really interesting kind of aspect from what you were just talking about, and drawing that into this is that place as a service, in terms of the flexibility of use, just being able to hire the space that you want for the day or for the week or whatever. How do citizens engage with that place? How is it serving them? Again, what role might the public sector play? Is it local council services? Is it health services and so on and so forth? Is there a plug and play option for the health service, for local government? You don't have to be there all the time, but you know, how do we build in that flexibility? So you do end up with place operating as a service to people. And I think coming back to the valuation aspects and how these things are looked at, that service element, and then what cash flow derives from that will play a part in that rethinking.
Really clever thinking. Place as service. And they're not thinking that way.
No.
But it very much, because it ties into the whole concept of experience.
Yeah.
Everybody talks about creating experience, but service has a construct behind it.
And in the digital world, you know, we're all living off our mobile phones and so on. You try and phone any institution these days, you can't. It's impossible. You've got to press option 1, option 2, option 10 might be let's speak to a real person. And in that digital world, and we can't roll the clock back. It is what it is. That's the way we are now.
Yeah.
So our built environment, our spaces, our places, need to be able to adapt as well, to work with that, not against it. And how you bring that human intervention. We all we want to meet each other, we want to play. But what does that mean in the digital world? And therefore that place as a service thing, I think, has got
it's a brilliant idea.
Way to go.
That was a good session. Some cool shit there, mate.